I'd like to go off on the members' comments about the public discussion and the feeling of, are we doing the right thing? Right in the room here, we have a number of television channels and papers behind us, clicking their cameras every second. So we are into public policy, and I think we on this board up here need to think about it because statewide, is there a problem? We heard from the professors at George Mason University, and they actually suggested to us 5 different things that we should probably do to address this. They referred to issues that were not even in the state or outside the state. When you listen to the testimony from the CSUs, it's clear that they have a very strong policy and how they're marching this to go forward. Having heard from the UCs, the same thing there, that they're addressing this issue. So we in the public discussion need to make sure we paint this in a proper light. The other thing I'd like to bring up is a lot of us, I've learned, because I've had thousands of people work for me, that in the process of this, when I look at people, often people will judge others by their own metric. Whoever they are, that's how they judge others. And often when you're dealing with the quality of chancellors and presidents, you'll find out that they're pretty exceptional individuals that have risen, they've been educated, and have gotten to a different level. I think Assemblymember Weber brought us some really good points on the difference between a CSU and a UC and who you hire and what they're trying to do. Right today in this discussion, we heard a very good discussion. What is it like to be at a UC and what their challenges are. That being said, mistakes happen. We've all had organizations that have had mistakes, but you need not to overreact and overwrite the ship and flip it over. That we don't need to do that. I'm one of the few members up here that actually sits on the budget sub too and in the higher ed, and I've been the vice chair of one of them. We have some real issues we're dealing with in the state as far as access to education, STEM, making sure we have diversity. We're looking at how long time to degree, and we're looking at quality. And you listen to the president from Davis; those are some pretty amazing accomplishments at Davis. So I'm glad we're having this, and I'm hopeful that at the end of this hearing, people are going to understand that there have been problems in this country, but it's not here in California. Does that mean that we've had bumps in the road? Yes, we've had bumps in the road, but we have good leaders at the top like Chancellor Wright, and I guess before him also, to start dealing with this, and I have full faith in Napolitano on the same way. So my way of looking, I'm glad we had the hearing. I think it's good for the public discourse, but we should not overreact to an article in the SAC-B and throw the entire UC-CSU system under the bus. So, but I'm glad I was here to listen to this.
Assemblymember McCarty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you all for participating. And as a CSU alum, I want to hats off for you outlining the reforms that you're talking about getting at. And Mr. Dodd briefly touched on this, and I guess my question is next to Mr. Larson at the UC. What going forward, I know you took a big step in this 10 years ago after the last so-called many, not scandal's not the right word, but scrutiny over this issue. What new policies are the regents or the university talking about bringing forth? Are there, I know I'm not sure if it was on our agenda, but we discussed this recently as far as having more regent oversight. Should these, when the president okays these, should the regents also do so? So should they be agendized so the public can see all of these as opposed to scouring on some back pages of the website what's happening? So in that sense. Where are you?
It's hard to predict what the outcome will be. The regents have called for a full review of the policy, and so we'll be taking direction from them as well as the president in shaping any changes to the existing policy. Currently, the review and approval process it rests with the approving authority. The approval rests with the manager of the SMG member, and in some cases that is the board. It's the chair of the board for those who report directly to her. And so that would be the president and a couple, three others. And then for the chancellors, the approval authority, there is the president. But if the regents decide that they want to have a different approval authority or a governing board that looks at these types of activities, certainly we'll look at that. Absolutely.
Okay. And next, I wanted to dig into the UC Davis situation just because it's the one we're here talking about. And before I get there, I just want to note that UC Davis is in Mr. Dodd's district, the campus, but the off-center campuses are in my district. So I see firsthand that tremendous value to the community, the students, the employees, the faculty, and I've seen the transformation of the Med Center campus in Sacramento, so I want to acknowledge that. And so we don't want to, throw the baby out with the bathwater, but nonetheless, I think it is important to focus on ethical lapses and conflicts, perceived or real conflicts. And so first, maybe for UC, Mr. Larson, then I'll get to Chancellor Katay in a few seconds. So in the agenda, it lays out the regents' reform from the mid-2000s after the last issue. And it talks about the conflicts, and there's real conflicts and there's appearances of conflicts. And so when then Chancellor Yudof approved, for example, the publisher entity, Wiley, was that lens looked at as far as the real conflict and the appearance of a conflict?
Those are looked at. I'm not sure what the president looked at in Wiley's particular situation. What we did find when we dug into the detail was that the chancellors are not involved in decisions around textbooks, which textbooks to buy. That the process actually rests with the professors who are teaching the courses. They choose the textbooks and they make the decisions around those textbooks. So there's more than an arm's length. In fact, there's no involvement from the chancellor's perspective, but perhaps she can talk to that specifically here.
Okay. And then when Janet Napolitano took over as president, did she essentially inherit the arrangements that other chancellors had, like Katay, or did she go and review these and approve the ones that were already on the books?
We have an annual process. Each of the SMG members is required to submit a list of the activity, any compensation that they anticipate receiving, the number of hours that they expect to serve on those boards, both compensated and uncompensated. They're also required to submit a detailed information form on any new activity, and that requires a lot more detail around compensated activities in particular. And so the President Napolitano she gets this pre-approval list for all of her direct reports, and she has the opportunity to say yes or no to each one of those ongoing activities as well as new activities.
Okay. And it's fair to say on DeVry that the president thought that would have been a conflict because while she didn't approve it nor deny it, she later said she thought it was a mistake. Chancellor Katay said that she was mistaken, misguided for going down that route. But in the policy that you adopted 10 years ago, you talked about violations of these policies are critical because, the great public trust of the university system. And you mentioned specifically that there must be consequences, and consequences must be consequential. And so you don't really mince words as far as what's happening. With the DeVry incident, President Napolitano, she's not here today, but maybe you want to speak on her behalf. She essentially says, I accept the apology, mistakes were made, we're moving on. So where does the accepting the apology, mistakes were made, and having consequences that must be consequential kind of jive with each other?
I'll have to let the president speak to that. I don't feel comfortable speaking on her behalf. When issues arise, and there wasn't Chancellor Katehi accepted the board appointment and for DeVry, and DeVry announced it prior to the president actually having approved it. That's the policy violation. And the president will take into account that violation in the chancellor's annual review, taking into account all the facts and circumstances, all the other things that the chancellor has done during the course of the year, good as well. And so it's a holistic look at the performance and contribution over the course of the year for her to make that determination as to what appropriate form of punishment would be meted now.
Okay. And then as far as the, I hear what you say, and I know I heard the chancellor's response to you as far as the textbooks, and I get it too, that the chancellors don't approve which textbooks are sold, but there's overarching issues, and that's the thing that I think gets me and many others so concerned is we know you had to pay $170 sometimes for a textbook, and all parents know what those textbooks cost, or family members or what have you, and so it is a real issue. And so the appearance is of a conflict is just the one that's just, right there. And what Ms. Baker said earlier, that when you serve on these boards, your mission number one is shareholders first. And so when you look at Wiley's SEC filings, they essentially, to paraphrase this, they talk about there's a growing demand for less expensive textbook options, and bookstores are looking for those choices, and they talk about how they're concerned that this effort could have an impact on the company's operating results, their net income. And so just wondering from you, Chancellor Katehi, when you took the position on the board of Wiley, were you active in going to the shareholder meetings and telling them that they're wrong and that we should look at having more affordable options? Or how did you grapple with these two issues? Because one, you see the students who are struggling paying their tuition, their housing, and the exorbitance of textbooks, and then the publicly traded company has a number one goal of increasing profits. And so how did you bridge that issue?
So the reason I joined the Wiley board, first of all, I was never in a position to, or I was never asked to have any saying on textbook cost or anything else related to that. As a matter of fact, the print part of any publishing industry is going down, as we know, and publishers are moving into online education. The only single reason I went to the Wiley board is primarily to advocate for open source access. I had started as a provost at University of Illinois, and I was involved in an advocacy with other institutions about open access for science publications. That was my primary goal. I think I contributed substantially in helping Wiley advocate for a 6-month duration when the publications would not be available, but then freely available to everybody. That was my primary goal. What I've learned, however, is that I've learned a lot about online. This is a very important topic for us as an institution. We have been encouraged by you, the legislators, to consider online approaches to learning and to education because they will provide lesser cost, which is true. But I also learned that the initial investment for online is very expensive. I've learned exactly what the institution needs to have to be able to move into this direction. And as a result of that learning, we are changing our university extension, which is involved in professional education, into a school of online and professional education, trying to get those learnings to the university. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
During your 3 years on the board for Wiley, did you advocate for new, cheaper online or alternative sources for textbooks?
Yes.
Publicly? Did you bring any? Do you offer any conferences?
When I was, as you know, when you are on a board of a company or a board of regents, you don't go individually to advocate publicly.
No, I mean as
for
a
an
chancellor.
opinion.
As a chancellor.
I will start. I'll tell you. As a provost at University of Illinois, I was very interested in looking at creating access to online textbooks as part of tuition. What you learn very quickly is that there are not all of the books available online. I wish that all textbooks, especially for science, would be available online, and that would have been an amazing opportunity for our students. And then I was very interested then in looking into making that part of tuition. Unfortunately, very few of these books are available online to make this happen. And so I was always, and I am, a very strong advocate of online access, and hopefully at a very low cost.
So in sum, you didn't feel conflicted going to the board meetings and calling for lower priced textbooks while you were getting compensated by the board whose effort is to make money from textbooks?
No, I did not feel conflicted, because at the end you try to advise the board. They invited me to go there. Practically, I have to say, not because I was the chancellor at UC Davis, but because of my experience in science publications and my previous work and advocacy for online. And I did not feel conflicted at any point while I was there.
Okay. There's an upcoming textbook conference at UC Davis in April, called the Textbook Affordability Conference. Are you participating in that on campus?
We have a lot of conferences on my campus. Almost every day there is one.
So I think it's on the Davis campus next month.
Yeah, good.
Are you part of that?
I'm not part of this.
Okay.
Usually I'm invited and into conferences that take place on our campus, and I go to a number of them.
Okay. I want to shift now to DeVry.
Yes.
And I know that you stated that was a lapse in judgment and a mistake. I just, and I think from what I read in your public comments and what you shared with me in your office, you knew that they had major problems, that they had their Cal Grant money stripped from them from the state of California, and that they had an ongoing investigation by the United States Department of Education and the FTC. So when they approached you, did they mention those issues and how that you could potentially help bring them to better standing in the education circles?
Let me go back and say, I said that my decision to accept the position before it was approved by the president, it was wrong. I accepted my mistake, and when I realized that the president did not have the opportunity to approve this, as well as when I realized that there were issues, I decided on my own to resign. And I decided to resign within less than a week from the time they announced it. So I did not have the opportunity to act as a board member, and I did not receive any compensation.
Okay, I get that, but that's the fallout from it. I guess I want to go back as far as what was the thought process going into it. And so I guess the big question is it's a troublesome body, the Diploma Mill University. And I think the question that I have, and I think the larger community has, is in your views, what was the benefit to the University of California and the University and UC Davis going to be from your participation on that body?
I will speak in general about online for-profits, and I know that there are a number that have been very problematic. But also since my time in the Midwest, I knew that DeVry, for example, at that time, and we're talking about mid-'80s, was providing a service that was not available through other public institutions. Degree completion programs for individuals who were working were in their 30s and 40s, a number of them automotive workers. That's what I knew. If you ask me, I think there is always going to be a service that is going to be provided by those for-profits that will not be provided by the public. The question in my mind is not only on how to take away those that are bad actors, but how to create standards for quality that will eventually help others, who will eventually survive it. That was my thinking. But again, I accept the mistake that I've made. I came to realize that the decision was a wrong one, and it was done prematurely, and I decided to resign, and I resigned within a few days.
Okay. Respectfully, you did not answer the question I was looking for, and I understand how you were looking to help these type of institutions, because they do meet a place in our society, especially with lower income communities of color. For example, at UC system, African Americans, I think, are 6% of the high school graduation rate, 4% of UC, but they're about 20% of the population for these for-profit schools in California. So, certain populations go to these schools, and so it's commendable that you would want to help make them better and serve the population that needs higher education in California. But for UC Davis, because that's the crux of the issue where we're getting at. We had from our prior panel, we talked about the benefit to the system, the benefit to the campus. So what, in your eyes, when you agreed to serve on the board, you actually did go to one board meeting, my understanding.
I was not a board member.
You went to a board meeting, but you weren't a board member. So you were interested in serving on the board, and what, in your eyes, was going to be the benefit to the students at UC Davis and the UC system?
There is we have been asked as an institution, and many publics have been asked, to start reporting on how individual students after graduation are placed, on how they, what they learn through their years in their undergraduate degree, how to parameterize that, to measure it, and how to also report on how the students are placed. I've known that has been, it's a question, it's an important question. There are no standards on how to do that. And I was hoping that I could help in this regard. But that was, I don't know what else to tell you. You're asking me a question, and I'm just trying to be truthful to you. And this is exactly the reasons.
Well, I asked 3 times how you thought it would benefit Davis.
That will benefit, of course. If I know how to measure, for example, we are asked on how to tell the public on how well our students learn and how well our students, because of their learning, are placed in they find jobs and then they are successful in their careers. If you ask me how to measure this today, I do not know.
Okay, well, I don't hear an answer, so I take it that there wasn't a benefit in your eyes to the UC system.
I think eventually, if we find a standard to assess how well our students make and how well they are placed after they graduate, is going to be a very important metric for an institution.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Dodd.
Yes. I want to respond to Member Baker said earlier about shareholders first. And I have served on a public corporate board, and I've served on private boards. In each of the cases, board members have fiduciary responsibilities to their shareholders, and that's known. But I really do, and I also had a board of my own that I selected board members on. And I think when board members are selected, they're selected for their expertise in given areas. And it's not my responsibility today to either defend or accuse the chancellor here of what's going on, but I did hear real or appearance of conflict. I'm convinced after what I've heard today that this is clearly an appearance, of conflict. I really am impressed by and would call, the university to daylight these instances where chancellors or anybody else are working in these jobs, and I finally think there, because of what's happened here, in their policy there will be consequences that are consequential. I believe that Chancellor Katehi has had consequences in being put through what she's been put through in the public scrutiny and everything else. It's not to say that we don't have the right or the opportunity to judge or question, because I think that is our responsibility. I thank the chairs for holding this committee meeting today. But I think that transparency is everything. And to the co-chairperson's point, I think the UC system can do a better job. But I would like to thank Chancellor Katehi for being here today and responding to these issues.
Thank you, Mr. Dodd. The representative counsel from Cal State University,
Yes.
she brought up Dr. Tomas Morales, who is the chancellor, or president rather, of Cal State San Bernardino, near me. I happen to know him well. And I just want to share that he serves as, I don't know if it's president of, I believe it's president of the Hispanic HACU, Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. And as far as I know, he's not compensated. And I very much see the value of what he's doing as president of CSU nationwide to advance higher learning to Latinos across the United States. So I do believe that there is a place for our executives, presidents of universities to serve on boards. Not to belabor the point, but maybe just in closing, I want to give Dr. Katehi opportunity to share with us, in general, as we look at policy, what are the benefits to California, to the students, to taxpayers, for executives, presidents, chancellors of university serving on boards, both nonprofit and for-profit, just in general?
Well, I think there are three reasons, three benefits that I see. First of all is the visibility of the institution among individuals who serve on these boards who happen to be representing other organizations at the highest levels. The second is for the individual to make a positive contribution to this organization and in return to learn from that experience and bring this learning back to the institution.
Thank you. And with that, let me thank the panel for being here today. Thank you, Dr. Katehi. And let me bring up our next panel. We've got an hour. Till session. We're almost on time. I want to welcome all of you and thank you for being here. And again, if we could go in the order of the agenda.